Welcome to Trauma and Transcendence, where healing meets awakening. I'm Amanda M. Dodd, your guide on this transformative journey. Thank you for joining me on this episode. Let's transcend together. Hello, hello, soulful seekers. How are you? As you can see, I've got another wonderful guest for you. I'm actually very, very partial to this one. This is my conference buddy. He means a lot to me, so be nice to him because I'm going to share him this time. In any case, this is the wonderful Albert Bramante. We've become very fast friends since meeting at the Vegas Hypnosis Conference, not last year, year before.
Yes,
But it feels like it flies, doesn't it?
it sure does. It just seems like yesterday I was there, seeing you and Linda at the table.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Tell my audience a little bit about yourself so that we can get to
well,
know you better.
well, first I just want to thank you, Amanda, for inviting me as a guest here. It's really a privilege and an honor to be here. I've been, a fan and follower of your work for a while. So my name is Albert Bramante. I have a doctorate in psychology. I also work full time, mainly as a talent agent in New York City. So I represent actors across the board: film, TV, theater, commercial, and print, and some voiceover work. So my job is really as an employment agent, trying to find them work and to also provide a lot of guidance and in their careers, as well as both even with their mindset and working with their background. And I've been very passionate and interested in mind-body work, hypnosis. I have a background in psychology, and especially traditional psychology initially in the beginning. That's where I started out with, and then I became interested in hypnosis. Incidentally, through a stage show, this is back in the year 2000. I'm thankful that there were no camera phones yet. So I was out with a group of friends, and I'm out.
What did they make you do?
And it was designated like the R-rated hypnotist. I was like,
Oh,
all right, you know what? My motto is I'm going to try anything once.
Okay.
So I went up on stage, not knowing anything about hypnosis, and I was like, let's have fun. And I became star of the show inadvertently.
Oh.
Ever since then, I became immensely interested as to the way I felt, how comfortable I was, because I was really more introverted than I am now. More extroverted, but I was very introverted when I was young. I couldn't explain why I was so comfortable on stage and doing some outrageous, stunts, which I'm
Are
not
you
going to
sure
say
there's
right
no
now.
video?
There better not be. Otherwise, there's going to be a bunch of memes coming out of that. I'm just going to say that. And so after that, I was like, I really want to study this. And, and then also through my graduate school, I went to graduate school and specialized in marriage and family therapy. And then we learned of Milton Erickson, who was one of the pioneers in our field of both, modern psychology and hypnosis. So, and I was like, I really like the approach of Milton Erickson, although I didn't really know that it was, hypnosis. So, long story short, I then saw a course online, learn self-hypnosis. And I did it. And I was like, I really want to do this. And then I started reading a couple of books by one of the late psychics, Sylvia Brown, who in her work, in her book, she talked about past life regression. I thought, this is really fascinating. Now, I'm a scientific background, so that was kind of considered like taboo. Taboo. So I then, took a couple of classes online in certification in past life hypnosis. And then there was an advertisement in New York for an 3-day in-person certification in past life work. Became really fascinated with that. So after I did the 3-day, I realized, I think if I'm going to want to do this work, I should do full certification in hypnosis. And that same school that I went to was offering a 180-hour certification program. And in 2011, I completed it. over, a 2-month period. And, it really had a background in transpersonal hypnosis, transpersonal hypnotherapy. And, so then, fast forward a couple of years, the agency took over, and then doing that. And then recently I became more interested in, hypnosis again. It saved my life, it changed my life. And I feel like it's, everyone should, be interested in doing this type of work. So that was, a little bit about me. I know I went on, but, that's.
I could listen all day, especially if you've got stories about stage hypnosis that I did not know about. You held out
Yeah,
on me.
yeah, I did.
Who
Yeah.
was the hypnotist? Do you mind?
I don't even remember. I wish I did, because I'd
That's
love to
convenient, Albert.
collaborate with. It really is. I tried looking, like, just seeing, okay, what
Yeah.
are the hypnotists in New Jersey, but it was definitely, I haven't seen him since. But yeah, I'm sure he would remember me. I can tell you that. It was that. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So
Yeah, they move around, so I can understand why it might be
yeah,
hard to find him now. But oh my goodness, what a journey it's been! So I hadn't realized you dove into transpersonal first. My audience is starting to know that a little bit, but if they haven't heard about it before, what does transpersonal mean to you?
for me, it means kind of like a third force. I mean, we talk a lot about, the mind body, but then there's also a little bit outside of us, like the universe, or what I consider like spirituality, um, and kind of tapping into those resources,
Yeah.
like our higher conscious, our higher self. All of us have that, that intuition that tells us, whether something's right or not, or we call it in the scientific community our gut feeling. And
Yeah.
that never really guides us wrong. And even my life, throughout my life, I've always had certain feelings like this situation's correct, good, or not a good situation. And I would say 90% of the time, it's always been accurate for me. And, then it was realized, okay, there's a name for this. Okay, great. Um, and so just the whole like mind, body, and then mind, body, and spirit. So for me, that's the way I look at it, like a third force. The beauty about our field is like almost everyone's going to define it in their own way,
Yeah.
and there's really no right or wrong way to define it. What works for you?
That you mentioned that because our clients are going to have all different beliefs as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so we really can work with every single faith, every system of belief, religion. It doesn't really matter. It really is
Absolutely.
whatever your definition of being is. So,
Exactly, and we can meet the client wherever they're at. Even if whether they have no, if they're just like, science oriented, objective, or if they're Christianity, or Judaism, whatever belief that they're at, whether it's secular, or spiritual, or just, even more practical, or even atheists. I feel like we can meet
yeah. Or
wherever they are,
exploring. Maybe they
exploring.
don't know yet. Yeah.
Hmm. Exactly.
So you began that journey right into transpersonal. You started exploring past life regression. What happened next?
Well, I had a couple of interesting past life journeys myself.
Yeah.
And the beauty about, for those of you who are not too familiar with past life work, the beauty of it is you don't really even have to believe in past lives for it to actually be effective. And even for me, like, I would say I'm skeptical. I wouldn't say I'm a 100%, uh, diehard believer in past lives. I'm open minded. I'm always curious, and that was like, I think, part of like what drove my interest in this field is just my curiosity. I've always been curious in knowing more about things and the meaning of life ever since I was a little
Yeah.
kid. I've always been on the meaning of life, type of person, very deep. So for me, that's what made me interested in hypnosis. I'm also interested in the traditional side of work as well. Regression parts work, the stuff that would traditional hypnotherapists work on too. That's always a passion of mine, just healing in general. But I've always been interested, like I said, in mind, body, and spirit, which is why I am so in love with NAF because it kind of combines both worlds, both the clinical
Yeah.
as well as the spiritual.
That it does. And so pretty quickly after we met, you found out about NAF, even though it had been existing. It's been kind of a well-kept secret at times.
Mm-hmm.
And then you came and you had that first experience at the 28th annual conference. What was that like for you?
It was very interesting because, again, I just found out about it like maybe that July of that year,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh, it's not too far from from me. It's only like an hour and a half plane ride. So it wasn't that far." I was like, "Let me check this out." I didn't know what to attend because I only knew you. At that time going in, I really didn't know anybody else, and I went there, and what I've really was amazed by was how at home I felt.
Yeah.
How I felt so like at ease the moment I got there, and the entire weekend it was just everyone was so welcoming, everyone was so not non-judgmental, so you know inclusive. Even the presenters, some of them that been in the field for 25, 30 years,
Yeah.
were so down to earth. I mean that was even my same experience with like the conference in Vegas that we go to. But I really just enjoyed the spirit, the topics on spirituality, the topics, even like the little healing circles we've had. That was just how really at home I felt,
Yeah.
and that's why I'm excited to come back to the
There are
29th.
really there are really no conversations that can't be had at NAF. I don't know that we can say that about anything else. Literally everything is open to exploration, whether it's near-death experiences, ETs, missing time, past lives, between lives, quantum lives, all of it.
Yes, yeah, totally. Yeah, and that's what was really interesting too. I mean, even between lives, that's kind of like the next topic I'm, personally interested in.
Yeah.
I actually have Journey of the Souls on my bookshelf, that's going to be my next book,
Yeah.
on my list to read. So, yeah. And this past summer, I did take a workshop at another conference on past lives, and it was
Yeah.
just done in a different, perspective, which made it interesting. So, I'm looking forward to attending in 2 weeks actually.
Yeah. But this year, the 29th annual conference at NAF, you're going to be presenting. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, at the end of the conference last year, I was like, I'm definitely coming back, and it was to encourage him through you as well as the founders, the organizers, to submit a topic. So I have two presentations. I have an hour talk on Saturday, a 45-minute talk on Saturday on soul family, like soulmates, soul contracts, and then on Monday afternoon, following your podcasting workshop, I'm doing a 4-hour AI workshop on AI and
Yeah.
kind of conversational AI.
Yeah.
So and content for content creation, just fun with AI. But I'm excited for both, especially my topic on soul families and soul contracts.
Yeah. Tell me more about that.
So one of the follow up trainings I did was in 2012. I did a clinical hypnotherapy training in California at the Alchemy Institute, and we talked about soul contracts. So this is, for anyone that's not familiar with soul contract, you know, in previous carnation, we might have made a vow to someone that says, I'll never leave you, or I'll always be by your side, which
Yeah.
might not be applicable today, in today's lifetime, several carnations later. So, so like if there's ever someone in your life that you just can't seem to get rid of,
Yeah.
they always just keep coming back. There might be an indication if you are open to it, that the idea that you may have a soul contract with that person. And so part of like hypnotherapy would process would work would be breaking that contract, because we could say that was then, this is now.
contracts, vows. This can include vendettas, revenge. I
Yes,
have even seen people curse themselves for an experience they were having in a past life and have it ripple into this life. So,
exactly.
yes.
Yeah,
And
and
so,
yeah, I
go
mean,
ahead.
I think that really is applicable because,
Mm,
we play different roles. Every
yeah,
one of us, and again, if you're in this belief system, there was a past life where you were a bad, a villain or the bad guy in there where you caused harm and destruction. And then through the in between, you may, dealing with atonement and guilt. And
mhm,
so there's times where you might vow to, okay, make up for it, or what we call karma. Say, I'm going to pay my karmic debt in future lifetimes. And, unfortunately, sometimes that could be unjust punishment.
yeah,
And so part of the hypnotherapy work would be releasing that karmic
yeah,
guilt. Okay, that was then, again, you know, you forgive yourself, and then maybe, even through trance work, go back and apologize to those you've wronged, and then, move forward, because there's no need to keep
yeah.
perpetuating the patterns that you're having now. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously, going back to even and dealing with something that you've done, and I'll be
Mhm.
talking a little about that, in there.
So, since you touched on karma, let's go ahead and play with it.
Yes.
Yeah. What is your take on karma?
Well, my take on karma, I think I think it's more self-imposed. I think, you know, more of it's guilt that we take on. Um, and that might even be into situations in this lifetime where we feel guilty about things that might be not that we shouldn't do. Like we take on too much, and I think that's what is almost a curse. And the advantage of the curse of the empath, I would say, being an empath has both good and bad.
Yeah,
Positive and negative. The positive side of an empath is you connect with people, you really can form genuine connections. The downside is
yeah,
we take on way too much, and we can get drained
mhm,
very easily and overlook ourselves,
yeah.
which can then, create a whole host of problems,
Sure
as we
can.
know.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of, like, in a nutshell, karma is self-imposed.
I agree. That's kind of my take too. So between my studies with Dolores Cannon, looking at the Michael Newton stuff, the other places that I've learned of life between lives as well, my take is that yeah, and as a medium as well, I see that more
Hmm.
often than not. Is that when we go to that between space, it's not that the and Akashic records. There's another one. There
Hmm.
are so many different places to explore the whole concept of karma. And what I've seen so far is it's really us working with a team of guides, ascended masters, records, lords of the records, whatever you'd like to call them. Those beings that no longer incarnate is part of it on my end that I've
Hmm.
encountered. And what I notice is there's never been a moment of judgment. Out of all of the mediumship readings, the Akashic record readings I've done, there's never been judgment. There's never been shame or condemnation or any of that. And instead, it's always oh, that was an interesting choice. What did you learn there? How did that work out? Would you do that again? It's always those kinds of conversations that come about. And so it really is us who are the ones who are imposing the judgment. It is us who are doing the life review and saying, man, I really don't like the way I had that reaction or that response or that pattern that kept playing throughout my whole life. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've always found, through my, studies and just even my own, intuition is that it really, if we ask to be released from it, it will happen. But we
Yes.
have to. That's the key. And I do believe that we travel within the same kind of
Yeah.
family, just different roles. So a lot of times, the
Yeah.
same people we surround ourselves with have also been in previous lives as well, and we sometimes just um, now maybe different roles. It might be
Yeah.
um, and so the one another myth that I really kind of we're hoping to dispel or, to clarify is the idea of soulmates. Because if you think of Hollywood or most of like the traditional viewpoints of soulmates as being like a romantic, connection, and I feel like that's absolutely, not the case. A soulmate could be, a rival in this lifetime, even. It just, or it could be a friend or a family member. It's just somebody that we are connected with. Have a deep,
or a four-legged.
Exactly. It's, it's somebody that really just, it's a being, or a just a kindred spirit in a sense. And we can have multiple. It's not just one.
That's
you
right.
know.
You recently wrote an article on Medium about one of your soulmate experiences. Would you care to deepen into it?
Sure.
I read it. It was a wonderful article.
Yeah, it was. It was something I really didn't understand at the time, and I think it was meant to happen that way.
Yeah.
So when I was first, this is way before my hypnotherapy training. I was going for my PhD, and we had to do a residency in Minneapolis for 2 weeks. And, there were a bunch of us from all over the country and even some parts of the world. And there was this online forum, and we started communicating, just kind of like, what a Facebook group would be today for the conference or for the residency. So I started conversing with this person from the other side of the country. I'm in New Jersey, she was in California. And we seemed to hit it off. We had a lot of same views, but it was a very nerdy discussion. We were talking about child development, and educational issues and philosophies and all that. We'd have these discussions. And then, the week we come connected, we ran into each other, and it was like you would have thought we were like old friends. Yeah. We didn't even like say, hi, I'm so-and-so. We just started we hugged and we just started talking. And throughout the conversation, I kept saying, there's something very interesting about this person. And every time she smiled, it was like angelic. I couldn't explain it. And it was like, her smile did something inside of me. It was like, and it wasn't a romantic, attraction. There was something much deeper here. Like I really felt her smile was doing a lot. And we just kept talking. And then after, the conference is over, we had this long we'd have long conversations on the phone. And we started ending each conversation with "I love you," and it felt normal. It didn't feel out of control. And I was, at that time, I really wasn't the person that wore their heart on their sleeves. I would never really tell people I loved them unless they really meant it, and I really did. Yeah. And then, unfortunately, she had passed away suddenly. And what I noticed for me was that I was having an intense reaction to her passing. Now, this was somebody chronologically that I knew for less than a month. And I've dealt with loss before, plenty of times. But this time it was much more profound. Like it rocked me to my core. And intellectually, I couldn't explain it. Why was I having such an intense reaction to losing someone that I knew very little in this lifetime? I only just really met her 3 weeks ago. And it really didn't take me, it took me many years. And for a while, I was in anger too. Like, why did this have to happen to me? And then it wasn't until later, like, well, maybe this wasn't a stranger at all. Maybe this is someone who I was deeply connected to. And, to take it less about me, maybe I was also there to help her make, her transition. And make, help, ease her transition over. And then I even felt like was her angelic smile as because she was, on her way out, of this world, that she was like transitioning. So that just kind of like sealed the deal for me. Like there's something more here. There's no way that this was just a random occurrence.
And that was kind of a catalyst for you, though. Looking back, that's when you then began to look into the transpersonal and the deeply spiritual and to start searching.
Yes, absolutely. Because I was just like, there has to be something. There has to be something happening here.
Could anything else have made you look into that before that? Because you said you were very, skeptical mind, very logical.
Well, I always, just even as a kid, I was just very interested in heaven and, or the afterlife and death, because even for myself personally, when I was an infant, I had a lot of health problems, and I had when I was a newborn, pretty much the first couple of weeks, I had a couple of brushes with, death.
Well,
And I think that part of that really just helped me move on from that. It just really helped me move on from that experience, and just, subconsciously, I feel like now it really lend me to that. So I was always a deep person.
yeah.
And you could tell the type of fun I was sometimes at gatherings when I was a kid, asking questions about things,
Yeah.
to people that weren't. It was like, when I was in college, like I wanted to work for hospice.
Mm,
I got very interesting reactions.
yeah.
It was like sometimes it was like some people became fascinated, other people were like, "Well, I'm gonna go get a drink now," and that would be it.
Oh,
But I
we're
can
so
understand that.
phobic as a society. Like, we're just so
We
phobic with our
we are death.
seniors, with hospice. Yeah.
We are an extremely death phobic society, and
Yeah.
that's a whole nother discussion because we're so removed from it.
Mm,
We have hospitals, we have all these things that are trying to expand our natural life here,
yeah.
and that we don't even look at as death as birth. It's a natural cycle
Mm,
of life. That every one of us, every living thing on this planet deals with that. It's the cycle of life. So and
yeah.
that was one thing I never understood. Was
Yeah.
why is it such a phobic or phobia um around that issue? And that was like kind of like my interest in that was just spirituality, deep topics.
Yeah.
I was always very deep. So yeah, and then of course that experience, I kind of think now they're all connected.
Mm,
I think that experience for me. I also felt was a reminder, like this is what you need to be focusing on.
yeah. See, that's why the podcast is called Trauma and Transcendence, because they
Yes.
typically go in that order.
Well, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, and transcendence was always, something that was important to me too. See, when I was going in the traditional psych models, I always was. I felt like that there was something much more than just okay. You had this experience, now you're traumatized.
Yeah.
Okay, so now what? And I feel like sometimes traditional psychiatry keeps the person perpetually traumatized. And rather than, okay,
Yeah.
how can we take this and have the person grow from this?
Yeah.
Why do we have to talk about like like for example, in our field, in the psychology field, we refer to PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder.
Mhm.
But why does it have to be a disorder? Why can't it be a
Yeah.
catalyst for growth? So there's
Yeah.
some communities that are now starting to call it post-traumatic growth
Or response. Yeah.
or response, because
Yeah.
disorder sounds like, okay, I have a disease now, I have a sickness,
Mhm.
I have a cold, and it
Yeah.
pathologizes it, and
Yeah.
there's no need to.
I
So
was diagnosed twice, once with PTSD and then later on CPTSD. So if anything, I am proof that it does not have to be a lifetime condition. If you dig in, you do your inner work. It can be, as our mutual colleague says, Shelley Stockwell, what is your post-traumatic growth?
exactly, what is your
Yeah,
what's your growth, and that, or I even think it becomes a superpower at some level, because
it
it's like
does. Yeah.
it helps us grow from that, and just helps us become more compassionate, more grounded, stronger,
Mhm.
appreciative, um, of just life in general.
Yeah, absolutely it does. And I do find that we have much greater capacity for relating, for kindness, for being able to do things out in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, and it helps it keeps us authentic.
Mhm.
It keeps us connected, authentic, and grounded.
That's
As I
right.
often say.
Yeah. After you work through the nervous system stuff, which we both studied together.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
so glad you were there for that. We
yeah.
did
I
that
mean,
one.
that was an interesting and eye opening workshop because it's important. Like I said, this is why I like
Mm.
NAF because it bridges the clinical side. With the spiritual because you definitely have to work through the nervous system.
Yeah.
Process it and process that first. So it's important to have an understanding of like how the body works and how the body processes trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. And man, I'm never going to forget that. That was a really cool time, and I'm happy that we got to share that
Yeah,
whole specialist training together.
it was really a good, an interesting and eye opening training.
Yeah.
And in several ways. I think.
Yeah. Absolutely, it was.
Yeah.
And then since then, you got a little quiet, and I didn't hear from you for a little while. And part of that was because you were busy writing a book. Look at this
Exactly.
guy. Oh
Thank
my
you.
goodness.
Yeah, Rise Up of the Script, my first book. Uh,
Yeah.
very exciting. Very exciting. That's been a work in progress for several years because I do work with actors, and I've noticed, throughout my years of working with actors, that there was a tendency to self-sabotage, or a tendency to, in layman's terms, shoot themselves in the foot. And not just actors,
Yeah.
a lot of people do that, where they don't really live up to their potential. That they're not doing everything they possibly can, or they're their own worst enemy.
Mhm.
And
How much of
often,
that would you say is related to previous trauma?
absolutely, I think it is a traumatic response,
Yeah.
to self-sabotage because again, a lot of times trauma happens, initially because we put ourselves out there in some degree and then got hurt, were victimized, or whatever happened to
Mhm.
us because we tried to love somebody, we tried to get close to somebody,
Yeah.
either as a young child or a young adult, and then we were met with, consequences. And so therefore the natural response is, well, I just won't do that again.
Yeah.
And what good way to just prevent yourself from doing that? And while you're protecting yourself, you also may not be living your true self or being authentic.
Yeah.
Um, and
Well, you have to be. I think you have to be inauthentic when you have trauma.
yeah,
Because if you're authentic, then you have to face all the things that you don't want to face in order to heal.
and it's very easy to not face it. To say I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do the hard work, and that's in any field or whether it's
Yeah.
physical work. It's easy to say I just won't do it.
Yeah.
And the population that the book is geared towards is performing artists, although it can apply to really anybody. But I've written it geared more for actors and performing artists. Now that world, these professionals have to put themselves out day in and day out,
Yeah.
auditions, and there's no guarantee that they're going to get employed or that they're going to even get the job. And there's estimated about 500,000 actors, in the North America. And there's only a limited amount of jobs, like 1 or 2% of them are going to be professional working to a point where they're going to be, able to retire or live off their total, savings from acting work. So that's 97 to 98% that are going to be, day to day working. So my whole thing is to try to get them to be in that 2%, or at least a mindset of that 2%. So if we ever focus on, even in our work with manifestation, a lot of times it's like kind of work as if this is happening. So what is the mindset of a working actor? What is the mindset of a professional person? And not just any field. What, act as if you are a working actor. The language we communicate to ourselves, the language you use, not just with other people, but even our self-talk is so important. So, I talk about that in my book is don't ever say you're aspiring or struggling or starving artist.
Mm-hmm. Oh, God, yeah.
Or even, even in our conferences, sometimes I'll do, I'll talk to someone else. I'll be like, what do you do? Well, I'm a budding hypnotist or I'm a struggling hypnotist.
Yeah.
And I take a step back and I'm like, why are you using that language? Because if you're using that language outwardly, I can only imagine what's going on with the self-talk internally.
Mm-hmm.
So, and our subconscious, we know our subconscious mind listens to everything we say.
And
So
then informs the body.
And informs the body, informs the spirit. And the universe say, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm a struggling actor. Okay, give it to me. Give me struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of like, and I use a lot of scientific research in the book too, to kind of explain how that works, and so we can take full responsibility for our.
So people who are not necessarily actors, but who are struggling with that self-sabotage, that self-doubt, who else would this apply to that would help them see things differently?
I think this would apply to really anybody. I mean, whether you're getting a job, going out to get a job, going out for that job interview, going for the interview at graduate school, or, going out to make that sale, or going out to do, really anything when you're putting yourself out there.
Yeah. What about rejection? Rejection sensitivity comes to mind.
And that's, especially the more empathic you are, I think we become a little more sensitive to rejection. The one parallel I often find is a lot of even actors and hypnotists and therapists are kind of very related. Like if you look at your client archetype, are very similar. And I often say is, using back to my NLP training, there's one basic saying with NLP is that there's no such thing as failure, only feedback.
Yeah.
So if we take that in the context of rejection, let's not take it personally. Because, whether it's you get to no for a job. That's all it is. So your services are just not needed today. There's no such thing as rejection. Your services are just not needed today or for this job.
They may have a different vision for the role altogether.
Vision for the role, you could be, for an acting, could be something so superficial. You're not the right height. You're not the right hair color. You don't have the right eye color. Something very simple that's out of your control. And even with a job interview, sometimes again, whoever, it could be that they're more qualified or just someone that the interviewer resonated more with. So you just do it again. And if it is something that you've done, you take that and you learn from it. Okay, what do I do differently? And I think if you can externalize or put rejection outside of you, and it's not about you, I think that's one of the ways you can transcend that rejection fear or that rejection mindset.
I think we see it with ADD as well, which makes sense when you think about it, because now they're looking at ADD in an entirely different scope, as though, this might be a trauma response and not an actual diagnosis, which I completely agree with, having been, diagnosed in childhood. And they didn't check for childhood trauma back then, did they? So now it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, the cups of like Gen X, right before like I'm not a millennial,
Same.
but I'm not, I'm not Gen Z or millennial, and
That's
so at that
why
time
we click. We're in that lost generation together.
I'm in that very lost generation because I almost am not considered Gen X either.
Yeah.
And there was really no child psychology. When I was young, it was okay, toughen it up, and don't cry. And then my favorite growing up in a traditional household, stop acting like a girl or don't cry. I'm going to give you something to cry about.
Yes. Very familiar with those.
Yeah. Which,
Yeah.
by today's standards would be toxic, toxic parenting
Right.
advice. So, but I think, we were meant to, again, have these experiences, because I
Yeah.
also believe that there's no accidents.
Mhm.
There's no random occurrences. Everything is connected once you look at it and once you see that.
Yeah. I completely agree. I will say that when it comes to fate, though, that I don't believe that everything is 100% fate. I think we have a good portion of free will, and then the
Hmm.
bigger plots on the map are fate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I agree, because if we said everything is fate, then why even try, at that
What would
point?
be the point?
What would be the point of trying? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, there are certain things that may be predetermined, but I also think that they're more themes rather than actual experiences.
Yeah.
But I also think about that free will thing. The universe is going to listen to us. It's going to give us what we put out. So I think free will is empowering. We're empowering
Yeah.
decisions. So look, you have a control to do something about it.
That was one of the more inspiring points of my life, was realizing, oh my God, I have a choice. I can
Mm-hmm.
actually enact change for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And then, right as that was happening, I had a full on transcendent experience that I've only ever heard Eckhart Tolle talk about. And it was impossible to sustain, but it was a beautiful, beautiful moment that I will one day cover.
And that's your moment, and your special moment that you can always go back to,
Do
and
you
reflect
have
on.
one similar?
I don't necessarily know that. I think, again, the whole Medium article that I wrote about was
Yeah.
probably my biggest wake up call. Um, I don't necessarily know if I had a transcendent moment, um, but again, I kind of known I was drawn to this type of work. There was a family story that keeps being brought up. When I was 7, I attended my first funeral. I had, a distant cousin of ours had passed away. I don't remember this. I remember the funeral, but I don't remember saying it. But I remember going up to the casket and then going to his widow and turning to my mother and saying, "Is this heaven?" And to this day, the family, keeps reminding me of that, how that really touched them. And I'm like, I don't even remember saying that.
Yeah.
And part of me wonders if that was, again, what all of that was about,
Mhm.
in a sense. So I've always considered myself spiritual. And I'm definitely looking for day to day, even experiences too, just being transcendent.
One day, Albert, if you're looking for a regressionist, I would be happy to explore that with you.
I
Because I'd
may
like
take you
to
up on
know
that.
what was happening there.
Yeah, I'll take you up on that offer. But yeah, no, I definitely have been curious about that, and
Mm.
I think, speaking of regression, another incident that I had, was I did a regression. When I was right after my past life work, I went to my instructor, who's a hypnotherapist, and I said I wanted, go on for a session, and I did a um, right. It was kind of like an in between. It was kind of like in that in between state, and I had a very powerful experience. So maybe it might have been transcendent.
Yeah.
Because I remember just being in a garden, and there was, it was like a lot of flowers, like one of the beautiful gardens I've ever seen in my life. And I just remember seeing, an angelic figure, a woman,
Mhm.
and I just kept asking her questions about my life, my present, incarnation, and she was giving me some, good information. And then that would be something I'd love to explore,
Yeah.
and go back to. Um,
Was there that feeling of unconditional love in that moment?
100%.
That qualifies as transcendent.
Yeah,
Yes.
not qualified. It was, I was dealing with, I was going to hypnotherapy, at that time because I had trauma that I wanted to look at, and I felt like even though the experience was transcendent at that moment, it was a bit not, it didn't feel transcendent at the moment.
Yeah.
So, but I, and I'm going to also explore that, in my 1 hour talk on Saturday.
Yeah.
So, because I feel like that, being was a part of my spiritual family, is part of my spiritual family.
Mm-hmm. Oh, save me a seat in the front, buddy.
Okay. Well, look forward to having you there.
Yeah, me too. Looking forward to being there. So, what else? Goodness, there are so many things we could play with and explore here. But you came from conventional psychiatry, then had this trauma experience with a soulmate and moved into transcendent, and now you've been on a lifelong kind of quest or journey for finding that deeper meaning.
I think I've always had that, spiritual bent. It was just repressed. Because again, I was so much in my left brain scientific mindset and logical, like research and experiments and all that, and more on the here and now, that I kind of pushed that aside.
Yeah.
And I think that wake up call, with that person that I encountered was like just there to say, okay, no, you need to be paying more attention to this.
Have you had contact with her since?
Through trance, I've had, I've tried making some conversations with her. But I need to work on that a little bit more. Just kind of like seeing what's there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because there could be more insights to be had and things to explore.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
And so then with all of that, though, now you're also supporting people overcoming a lot of challenges and traumas that have led them to possible codependency or people-pleasing patterns and difficult relating dynamics and gaslighting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, part of my own experience here is, being, kind of, I've always been the type of person to put myself last. I think up until recently, actually, to be honest with you, I've always, and even I sometimes have to work today a little more at setting more boundaries with people in my life, because I'm just always like, okay, whatever makes you happy.
Yeah.
I always grew up kind of like being the martyr, like always putting myself last or doing, things that were self-destructive just because, well, I wanted to make other people happy. And, I think due to my own trauma and my own work, I've always felt this nagging need that I'm not wanted or I'm not supposed to be here, sort of thing, like guilt. So I developed that people-pleasing mindset, which is very easy to go down. And, I think, what I found, through just not only just doing research, but just my own experience, is become a lot happier when you shed that people-pleasing mindset.
Oh, God, yeah.
It's so much easier, it's so much lighter when you're no longer worried about what other people think of you, or you're not going to make everybody happy. I mean, that's just the reality. Case in point, I'm a presenter, I'm a teacher, and most of the time I get positive evaluations. There are times I don't, do not, and I'm okay with that now. I'm okay with just letting that go. I can't please everybody, and I think that's a very liberating thing that you can do. And if we can help, if I can help, or we can, just to shed people from that, like, look, you're not going to please everybody. The other person who pleases yourself first, and then.
Yeah. I will say your talk at HypnoThoughts Live this year, Breaking the Chains of the Martyr, was one of my favorite talks of the whole conference. Absolutely. It was very deep. You had a standing ovation because you touched so many hearts in that moment. And I think everybody could relate. And it was palpable throughout the whole room. So if somebody gave you a negative critique on that talk, you tell me and I'm going to beat them up.
I mean, and part of what we realize as we go through is that people are dealing with their own internal filters.
Yeah.
So even if you get a negative critique about something, sometimes it has nothing to do with you. It's their glasses that they have on.
Yeah.
And we sometimes see that too, even in our field. Like somebody will just react negatively to something that you think to yourself, well, this wasn't intended to it.
Right.
Yeah. Why did they react that way?
It's like, I don't know what minefield I just touched, but oh boy.
Yeah. And
shrapnel everywhere.
Exactly. You step in the landmine sometimes unintentionally, but then realizing that that's not your landmine to fix.
No.
And that was one of the biggest breakthroughs I experienced. Like, okay, not every landmine or not every accident is meant for you to fix.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you just have to let people go and be what they need to be.
I think I can identify when that began to coalesce for you, because you immediately shifted, and I saw it. I got a bit of a preview of it. And then what I noticed was immediately after, you had a surge of creativity and creation energy come through you. And that's exactly what happens when you start to really stand in your authenticity, when you stand in your own power and your own control, and you let go of the chains of the martyr or the people pleasing. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's becoming more authentic. And that was part of my subtitle of my talk in Hypnothoughts Live, like being more authentic. Because once you break the chains, you're now your authentic self. And people are going to more connect, because that was also another thing that people pleasing is a kind of like a vicious cycle, because as much most goals for people pleasers is to get people to like them, get people to love them. But actually, it almost does the opposite. People will take advantage of people pleasers and then even lose respect for people pleasers. So the very hard thing that you're working day and night to prevent is actually going to happen.
Yeah.
So, sometimes saying no and standing for yourself is going to get the right people to respect you.
Absolutely.
The people that are worthy enough are going to respect it. Because even if you make a request and someone says no, and you say no, if they really are truly meant to be in your life, they're going to respect that.
Right. And they might even be happy for you, knowing that you're putting your energy in different endeavors, and that's where you're meant to be, that is where you're heading. For me, it was more of a survival strategy. So it was people pleasing in order to feel safe.
Yes.
But the more that you give in and people please, the less safe you actually are.
Right. Because, the people that are going to be taking advantage are not going to be looking out for your safety. Because at that point, it's like, what can you do for them?
Right.
What can you do for them? And that's why I found myself always getting into these, relationships, whether they were personal, professional, romantic. It was always what, it was like, what can the person get out of me? And it wasn't until I started standing up for myself and setting boundaries, that it stopped. And so, even throughout my talk, one of the things I said was to stop, not to act like a victim anymore, but acting like a creator. Because when you take on a creator mindset versus victim mindset, things will change. Because going back to the post-traumatic growth, what can I create from this?
It brings to mind that book. I want to say it's Radical Self-Accountability or Self-Responsibility.
I know of it. And I think that's true too. It's just, again, taking that responsibility.
Absolutely. There's so many things I want to explore and that I want to talk about. I can't believe an hour is almost already here, and it's like, come on, we're just getting good here.
I know. It's
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I would love to come back at some point, you
Mhm.
know. Um,
Oh, we don't
I
have
would.
to go yet, do we?
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah. One thing I do want to dispel is people believe that healing is hard. And I want to say that it's not. And it doesn't have to take a long time, that it can happen fast. With the
Hmm.
whole people pleasing thing, the most uncomfortable part is setting the boundaries. That is the most uncomfortable part of the journey to me.
Hmm.
And then what we don't talk about enough is the freedom that comes from breaking those chains.
Yeah,
Those of us that have been through it. Well, you're doing it. You're talking about it, but
and I'm
I
still
don't
working
talk
through
about
it.
it very
It's
often.
not. It's not. Um, I mean, I'm walking the. Trying to walk the talk too. But it is. There is a lot of freedom when you say no. There is a
I
lot
heard
of.
you, you New York, right there.
Yeah.
I'm
Sorry.
walking the talk, and it came
Welcome
out.
to. Yeah. I can't lie. I can't say I was in the Midwest. I'm from New Jersey, New York. So but going, you become free when you say that,
Yeah,
when you say no and start setting boundaries. And
yeah,
again, if someone's going to get really offended by you setting boundaries, then that might not be the person you want in your life. Even like with going to conferences, I was always the type that like, I'm going to go to everyone's talk. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that.
mhm,
And then realizing, what do I have very low energy?
yeah.
Or, why am I by the third day struggling to get out of bed? Um,
Why is it taking me 2 weeks to bounce back?
Why is it taking me 2 weeks to bounce back?
Sorry.
And realizing that, okay, this is me. What am I doing wrong? So, sometimes say no. Like because everyone when you go to conference, come to my talk,
Yeah,
come to my talk, better come to my talk. And sometimes I even said to myself like, look, I can't make it to your talk, but I'll get the recording and I'll listen to it and I'll give you, provide my thoughts and feedback. I'm rooting for you.
yeah. It does.
And
It gets challenging with wanting to support colleagues and show up for people who show up for you, but then
yeah,
also doing things that you're genuinely interested in that are outside of your normal box. And that's the whole big thing about conferences is getting exposure to things that you don't
well,
typically see.
and one of especially with preparation, when I start, even advising people, because I've been to this my fourth Vegas convention I went to this year,
Yeah.
and it's one of the largest hypnosis conventions at least that I've been to, and there's so many different talks and so many different things. I often say is like go to a talk that you would never think about going to.
Yeah.
Like I remember, I went to one last year on shamanic drumming.
Yes. Yeah.
And I remember sitting, thinking at first, I would never go to that. And it was amazing.
I
And
remember.
the presenter was
Yeah.
absolutely amazing.
Mhm.
And I connected, we connect. And I never would have done that if I just stayed to my
Yeah.
thing. So not only is it going, stretching up, but even meet people too. Like, because
Yeah.
there's a tendency sometimes when you go to conferences with the same people to just want to hang with the same people.
Yeah.
And that's important to definitely have that anchor.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you should meet with other and socialize with other people.
And people that you wouldn't ordinarily, because even though they're on a different track, doesn't mean you don't have some interesting, fun things in common or that
Yeah.
there isn't a whole wealth of stuff for you to learn.
Because even if
Yeah.
you're on the same different track professionally, maybe there's something like personal interest you're going to connect with.
Mhm.
I've done that too. I mean, at this conference prior to the new venue we had,
Yeah.
the old venue, we had group lunches every day. And one of the things that even I vowed to do is like every day I'm going to sit at a different table.
Yeah.
Because I want to meet new people.
Mhm.
And that's the whole purpose of a conference is connecting with people, not just staying with their own little world. So go to
Yeah.
talks, do things that are different. And I'm a
Mhm.
big believer, advocate. Even in my book, I talk about the step outside your comfort zone, do something
Yeah.
different. Like me
That's
with
a
that
big
hypnosis
path.
show.
Yeah.
Going back to the hypnosis show that I did, now had I not did that, who knows where I would be today.
That's a big path to healing trauma, is stepping outside your comfort zone. And so when I do get people who are really entrenched and their nervous system is entrained to constantly be in fight or flight, it's like, great. Now's the time for you to stop doing all the things you normally do.
Mm-hmm.
Let your neuroplasticity experience something else and pleasurable things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that may be too. It may just take time to experience new things, and
Yeah.
a lot of time, another thing that I've learned, especially, is a lot of people feel too almost comfortable being
Mhm.
at functioning on a dysfunctional level.
Yes. As
Or
humans, it's terrifying how comfortable we can be with really negative conditions.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that was like one of my wake up calls. Even my traditional psychiatry is in psychology experience and training was that how a lot of people just don't really want to get better.
Because it's terrifying.
It's
Yeah.
terrifying, and or how people just are wrapped up in their. It's almost like it's a comfort zone. It's an addiction, feeling that at that
Identity.
rate, that
It's
identity.
their
It's an identity
identity.
going
Yeah.
back exactly, and
Yeah.
that's where the identity has to shift from. You know,
Mhm.
you're not an individual with depression. You may be having depression, dealing with depression. You're an individual
Yeah.
dealing with depression. You're an individual, and that's the whole thing. Even when they're
Mhm.
professional, people say, "I'm a smoker." No, you're a person who's like smokes cigarettes.
Yeah.
Because when you say I'm a smoker, it's going to make it really difficult to quit.
Yeah.
And that's why you can't, you know, or when people say I'm a food addict or I'm a,
Mhm.
alcoholic.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, why would your subconscious want you to give up something that you're so entrenched in?
Right. I had Luke Howard on the podcast a while ago, and his biggest gripe in that moment was when people go to Alcoholic Anonymous, what is the first thing they do and say? They
Um,
own this label that no longer fits. And
mhm.
then all of them is listening.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and that's why like our current traditional model of substance abuse has been failing people for
Yeah.
years, decades. It's a revolving door, whether it's alcoholism, drug use,
Yeah.
because it's like, hi, I am so and so, and I'm a, which means now you're putting it on you internally rather than
Mhm.
externally looking like I have a habit or I have.
Or here is a symptom of my trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was because this is me. If you're saying I'm a um,
Mhm.
it's like, well, then why are you not going to want to get? You're not going to want to get better because
Yeah.
your subconscious is going to hold on to,
Mhm.
because it doesn't want to change. So I think if you start putting things externally
Yeah.
and and also I think a lot of it's maturity too, because even peers my own age, our own age, are becoming less with worrying about what other people think too.
Mhm.
Going back to the people pleasing thing,
Yeah.
and I often say, if I wish, there's one thing I could change about my teenage years, it would be to get rid of the people pleasing.
Mm.
You know, mindset. I think I would have been so much better off if I stopped worrying about what other people thought, or or
Undoubtedly. Yeah.
tried so hard. And that was like my big thing was like I need to try so hard to get people to like me.
I
And
will say there was a silver lining to it because I earned and learned so many skills and abilities that I probably otherwise wouldn't have.
yeah,
We really do.
absolutely,
Those people pleasers become the most multi-talented people you've ever met.
we are. Yeah, I mean, because it's like,
Well, we aren't anymore, but
well, yeah, I'm just saying,
I made the mistake the first time and then you
yeah,
stepped in.
yeah. I'm in recovery, Anyway, I'm a recovering people pleaser. Yeah,
Same.
those of you listening, definitely, um, but again, it's like it's an identity shift, and I think until you take that external thing, like I'm a person who
Mm.
might have a problem with smoking, or I'm a person who may, have this issue
or
with
I
drugs,
experience.
or I experience. It's not I am, because when you take away that I am, when you can externalize that, that's when you can get rid of it.
That whole shamanic trip that you went on, that was a little bit of spiritual awakening that I saw you go through. That was very fun for me. Thank you.
Yeah, it was. And even when I was going through it, again, I didn't really know what to call it.
Mhm.
It was definitely, something I was considered an awakening.
Yeah. Where has that taken you now that we're a few more months out?
Well, I think for me, I want to kind of go back there a bit, and a different set of eyes and ears. Because I did the experience, I think what you're referring to a couple months ago, that I went into it too strong,
Mhm.
especially with the aids that were given. I'm not going to say too much more than that. I think I overdid it with the aids that they were giving, that I just completely just conked right out. And then I had a debriefing experience afterwards with the facilitators, like about a month after. And now I got a whole new perspective about it.
Did you notice a big shift in your nervous system?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I noticed like I'm a little more relaxed ever since that. And that was without intention, because like I said, I had no idea what to expect when I took into that experience. And I know some of you listening probably like, what the heck are you talking about? I'm not going to mention it right here.
I think you can if you'd like to. I don't think it matters.
Well, because I don't know
It's entirely
entirely
up to
if it's
you.
legal. So I, again, speaking of stepping out of your comfort zone, decided to take a spiritual medicine post-conference workshop. And what they did was they gave cacao, which is, that was amazing. That was like an energetic, like using plant medicine, chocolate, plant cocoa.
Well, it promotes oxytocin, right?
Yeah.
And serotonin?
Serotonin. One thing I did that I will say from that experience, when I did take the cacao, my awareness skyrocketed. My mood skyrocketed. My focus skyrocketed.
Maybe some GABA?
I'm thinking that too.
Yeah.
So then the next phase of that was cannabis, in the form of edible.
Yeah.
Now I got those confused because I thought, because the facilitators had said, like, look, you're only going to do a small piece of this edible, because it's, you've never really experienced cannabis before. It's going to be a bit overwhelming. Now I was still on that GABA high. I thought that was from the edible.
Don't do this again without me.
I'm thinking, this is great. Let me consume the entire edible.
Okay.
And then about an hour later, I learned, yeah, this wasn't connected. Because as soon as whatever GABA levels went up high, it just went, crashed into the ground.
What goes up must come down.
No, it came down really hard. I think it crashed. It didn't just come down. It crashed, into the hole, into the ground. And to a point where I was just comatose, pretty much.
Yeah.
Nothing dramatic,
I wonder what's happening with like the neurotransmitters and everything when you get like this surge of all these natural happy chemicals. I mean, at some point there must be a neuroinhibitor or something that happens to kind of regulate and bring that back in.
Well, I think it's called, regular. Of course, everything has to be regulated. And even in the case too, I mean, because eventually the next morning everything wore off. But I think for me, even, because when I told the facilitator what happened later on, the question's like, why did you do that? I'm like, oh, because I thought they were connected.
Felt good in the moment.
It felt good in the moment. So if I were to do that again, which, the jury's still out, but if I were to do that again, it would be very controlled. But I will tell you that and the reason I became interested is that, on a serious note, there is a lot of evidence starting to show that, even on the scientific evidence-based claims, that psychedelic medicine can help with like depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
So I am curious about it, so, but I just don't know if I want to have that intensive experience. Again, it wasn't anything, negative or anything. It was just more of, I felt, if you've ever taken Benadryl for when you're sick, multiply that times 10. And that's what I was feeling the entire night, to a point where I was like,
you had
and
some
a little
regret,
bit, and it was a little paranoia. It was a little
Yeah.
paranoia too in there.
Yeah.
So, and plus it was a new experience for me too. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not. How would I like to phrase this? I'm not someone who promotes the use of cannabis or marijuana or any of
And I
that.
wouldn't.
But
Yeah.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't. For those, only if you're really curious about it, I would say, whatever you do, make sure you do this with someone who's trained, and really experienced, and have good intentions going into it,
and go into it from a positive, strong mindset
and
as
only
well.
if you want to do it.
Yes. And have some parameters for sure. So I did do it a couple of times, but I didn't let it become regular habit. And I didn't even use the full cannabinoid. I was actually using Delta 6, which Delta 6 or Delta 8, it's legal here in Ohio, legal amount. But what it did for me was help me bust through the neuroplasticity and stop the repeating patterns and loops to help reduce the muscle armoring that happens with PTSD. So I used that not on the same day, but in tandem with also going to the sauna, with doing detoxes, with using sensory deprivation tanks, with doing yoga. And through all of those changes of patterns and habits, that's how I busted through the PTSD response in my system. And it made all the difference.
And
so I maybe did it 3 times over the span of 3 months, and that was enough.
Yeah. Like I said, it's been almost 4 months, 3 months, I would say, since and I don't know if I'm going to do it anytime soon again, or ever. I don't know. I probably will do it, at some point again, just differently. I don't know if I would necessarily advocate that to somebody, but if somebody who's interested or curious about it, again, good parameters, and I would never do it alone. I would never recommend doing this alone, and with someone who's trained.
I don't know how some people do this on a daily basis and in excess. And I think anything in excess is always going to be a problem. For sure.
Yeah, anything in excess. I mean, I think even sometimes people go to therapy in excess can sometimes be just too much.
And then they're just reliving it all again, just rehashing it and being steeped in it, and then the neurology responds.
Yeah. And going back to your thing about healing, I mean, I often think there's yes, we do some regression work, and there's a time to know about it, but that doesn't mean you have to constantly keep going back.
No.
I think, and even with our work with regression, this is kind of, I know some people are scared of regression, but oftentimes you can even do it from a detached standpoint. Like sometimes as hypnotherapists, we might say, okay, you're watching something on the screen. So it's important definitely to go through it, but you don't have to necessarily, be flat, because I've seen some school of therapy where the person's flailing on the ground, in a memory, and I'm like, you don't have to do that.
No, it doesn't have to mean suffering. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, you're such an interesting guy. And this is why we hang out during conferences, because you're my favorite person to kind of dive into your mind. It's just so fun.
Well, I think we have similar views on a lot of things, and I think
we do. Yeah.
And I think that's what, helps us connect. We have similar viewpoints on a lot of different topics.
And when we don't, we're really able to be mature and explore the differences rather than get triggered. So that's always a pleasure.
That makes it interesting, because who wants to really always have the same exact viewpoints on things? one thing you can get along with someone who has different points of view. I wish other people knew that.
Right.
We're not going to get into now, but I wish people would be more tolerant of other people's points of view. That's my wish.
I mean, that's when the really interesting conversations happen, for sure. That's when it gets so much better. We get to actually learn something.
We get to have totally different of opinion. I mean, and that's great. That's what makes it so exciting.
So what is next for you?
So my next step is, writing 2 more books. One of them being...
Tell me about those.
So, again, the martyrdom theme, breaking the chains of the martyr complex, the martyr archetype, whichever way you look at that.
What is a martyr?
So a martyr is someone who puts other people before them, or sometimes will punish themselves. Traditionally, like martyrdom in society, a martyr would be like, the soldier who would actually, step on, the rake or the grenade landmine to help save other people. Or
that's a
because
powerful metaphor right there.
It is. Well, because that's what traditional martyrdom is all about. Like someone who will do things, self-destruct, go into the fire to save another person, even though they might be harming themselves. Now, so I don't want to glorify martyrdom in some way, but because sometimes we do this, we step into things that we don't need to. Yeah. Martyrdom is also self-punishment, someone who feels they don't deserve, something, to destroy it.
For me, the biggest characteristic was resentment. When I was full on in martyrdom, man, could I have resentment.
Well, and that's a common feature too. I did too. Especially, the one thing that I was listening to, one of the people I admired a lot is Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
And he did an excerpt recently about talking about like nice guys.
Yeah.
And it really was a wake-up call hearing that. I mean, I knew, beyond that point, but, I used to be one of those people that would say, I'm a nice guy. Not realizing that usually that time when people would describe themselves as nice all the time might be resentful. And usually martyrdom does, because you start, what happens is you self-sacrifice, and these people obviously are not going to return that to you. And then you start thinking, look at all these things I've done for people, and I'm not getting any thanks back. That's classic martyrdom speak. And then what happens is that also drives more people away from you.
Absolutely it does, because it can come with rage, and it can be passed down through generations.
Yes. It certainly can. And there was one speaker that I think we both, that I really enjoyed listening to at multiple conferences, Susie Day, who actually talks about generational trauma and ancestral trauma. And I definitely think that martyrdom and people pleasing falls under that umbrella.
Yeah. This year she's presenting the empath workshop, and I'm kind of peeved that it's at the same time of mine, so I can't jump in and see her.
Yeah, that was true. And I think there was also an energy one that I wanted to go to that same time that we're doing ours.
Luke. Luke, I know, it's Luke Howard. I'm bummed.
I know. But, I like, that work that Susie's doing, and how it's a lot of times patterns of behavior can be generational. And certainly if you dealt with people pleasers and martyrs and also I think sometimes if someone like a parent internalizes martyrdom, they then expect their children to be martyrs too.
Yeah, they kind of entrain them that way.
Yeah. And it doesn't, work. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about that, how parenting comes in, and how to break the chain, because it really is a chain. Martyrdom is a chain. It holds us down. It weighs us down. So that book is going to be exciting to do. And then the other one I'm going to do is gaslighting. Now, one of the things I really didn't talk too much about. I had a previous. I was in a previous partnership, and it didn't really work out. And there was some gaslighting there. So my third book, the book number 3 is going to be on gaslighting at work, but also including at home too, because I've dealt with that personally too.
Yeah.
For those of you unfamiliar, gaslighting is sort of like a manipulation tactic where you start to doubt your own sanity. That the other person
Reality
does,
as well.
doubt your own reality, your own sanity.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a classic movie in the early 1940s in which a husband would, like, leave the lights on or even leave the gas on the stove, and then would blame the wife and say, you left, you're clumsy, you're clueless. And then she started to think that in the story that she was the one leaving the gas lights on and then the lights on. And so her reality was threatened. And so sometimes parents, what they might do with gaslighting is, like, let's say you bring in, or anybody, that's not what I said. You're overreacting. I didn't say that.
You didn't understand me correctly.
You didn't understand me.
You're so sensitive. Right?
How are you? You're overreacting. Stop. Stop being so dramatic. And, and you start to think, well, am I really, did this, maybe I am overreacting.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, one of the biggest freedoms is when you know you're being gaslit, when I actually know when it's happening.
Oh, yeah.
Then you realize, okay, I'm not crazy. And, another conference, when I gave the presentation, I had said one of the signs that you're in a gaslighting relationship is if you have a sudden urge to tape record the conversation. Now, I don't recommend doing that for number one.
Well, it can be really helpful. It can also be massively triggering.
It's going to trigger the other person because then...
Well, no, you don't. I'm not saying record it and have the other person hear it. I'm saying record it so that you can rehear it, because I have done that. And in doing that, I got to see how that person really spoke to me, that in the moment I wasn't registering, and I'm like, ooh, that is really nasty.
Yeah.
And it gave me a whole lot of permission to then pull my power back and start saying no. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the thing about with a gaslight, it's hard, but it's one thing I advise not to do is to confront somebody and say, you're gaslighting me.
Yeah.
No, that's going to trigger even more. And it's what's going to happen is then you're going to get because, like, let's say if you go back in that situation, that I want to play this conversation, the other person's going to say, you recorded me?
Right. You're going to inflict possible narcissistic rage, or they may be entirely unconscious to this behavior. This might be a subconscious thing that they're doing that they don't yet have self-awareness of.
Well, and that's absolutely true. Most gaslighters are not even aware of what they're doing. And, and I kind of like said it to my, one of the things which made people chuckle in the audience, so people would chuckle, is I said, if you think or question that you may be gaslighting other people, there's a good chance you're not. Because you don't have gaslighters don't have that insight.
Yeah.
Level of insight that what they're doing
That's
is
the other
wrong.
thing, is questioning, am I the narcissist? Am I the problem?
Yeah, there's a good chance that you're the one being, because again, a person, I don't want to say that they're good, but a person who's really skilled at gaslighting is going to make you, and do a good job, effective job, is making you feel like you have the problem. Or you're the one that's the weak employee, or in my case, the poorer business partner. And then that's what's going to happen. And you start to internalize that, or maybe I am, or maybe it's this way. And so, and until you break free from that.
And for them, that's coming from a survival need.
Yeah. And may themselves are dealing with their own narcissist. Maybe they were narcissistically injured to themselves.
That doesn't absolve them from their behavior.
No.
But they couldn't just be coming from a wound they've not yet realized or addressed, and it's showing up that way.
Right. Yeah. So, but that's what my third book is going to be on.
That's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need an Albert podcast. When is that happening?
Well, having you said that, I might be taking someone's workshop in November
Oh, it's gonna be such a good day.
Yeah.
I get to have you for 4 hours. I
Yeah.
love that.
Well,
I would love to hear you have a podcast. Let's go.
that's
Yeah.
something I definitely want to do.
Okay.
And I don't even know what theme it would be yet. Specifically, it might just be like a general.
You have a lot to work with, my friend.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people too that would probably make some great guests.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
but yeah,
that is a pleasure.
yeah.
I would, hey, no pressure. If you don't, you don't. But if you do, I would be
I'll also
overjoyed.
I'll extend the invitation of mine too. So, the afternoon one on AI. So
That's right. That's
yeah.
right. Okay.
And it follows the same similar topic, too, because we're both going to be working with computers and laptops. So
Yes. And
yeah.
actually, there's a lot with AI. We're going to cover some AI in my workshop.
All right. Yay. Okay.
And there's a lot to do with AI that can really help a podcast go a long way.
And well, not just in general, just AI can really help overall.
Yeah.
I mean, and hopefully if anybody's listening, I hope you'll attend this both of our workshops, because even for the AI portion, a lot of people are still afraid of AI. But I often say it's the same fear that I remember back when the internet was invented, came out in 1995, 96. People were so scared of the internet that it was going to take people's jobs, that it was going to be, cause so much harm on society.
I don't remember that. I don't know.
That was, yeah, I'm a couple years old.
I remember Y2K.
That was fun. But even I knew that would never happen. Even though people were so scared of that, I knew that it would never happen. But, a lot of people are scared of artificial intelligence, but we've been using it, prior to it really becoming more popular. I mean, it became popular in the end of November 2022 when ChatGPT was born. But we've been using Siri, GPS, Alexa, if you use Alexa at home, or Echo, or even just on Netflix. What is it? After you watch them, it'll say, you may be interested in this.
Facebook.
What is Facebook? The
algorithms.
That's all that is AI. And that's been there for years, before, the AI boom comes in. So I often say it's not necessarily AI is going to take people's jobs away, but I do think that you need to know AI. In today's world, there's no way of getting around that. So,
Jim Kellner did a wonderful keynote last year at Michigan Hypnosis Conference, and he was talking about how, no, AI is not going to take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI will.
Yeah.
And he gave a killer keynote.
Yeah.
You got to come to Michigan.
I really do. I know. It's just so many. And so
there is.
I mean, I might just have to juggle next year and maybe switch some conferences out, because I want to try new conferences too.
I love Vegas, but it's going to back burner this next year for me so that I can go do something else.
I think that might be me too, because if I do, I did submit to Heartland, so if I do go into Heartland, I probably might.
You did. Oh.
Because I'll be doing that and then IACT, and then so I might. I don't know yet. I have to see, because I love it. Don't get me wrong. I think the Vegas conference is great, and I encourage everyone to do it. But I don't know. If I can swing it, and I'm definitely not going to be overextending myself to swing it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think it's healthy to take a break sometimes, because you do get to know everybody, and then it can get a little repetitive. And so you want to step away and wait for things to come fresh and have new opinions on the scene and new approaches.
And just think about, even sometimes waiting a year, how the next year when you see people, that may get that may be stronger connection.
Yeah.
So
exactly. Thank you so much for coming, my friend, and for being here and for sharing.
Of course.
For those people who love your vibe and what you're all about, who do you work with typically? Who comes to you to work through their blocks?
Anybody, of course, if you're an actor, a performer of any sort, or anyone who's just may need a little bit of encouragement about putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk with you and help and work through that. And to really, help you realize your greatness.
Yeah. I can see that about you. You do that as a colleague for so many people.
Yeah.
And it's always a joy for me when I get to spend time with you.
Same here, definitely.
Yeah. And let's get started on your podcast. That's exciting.
Yeah, and I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks and hanging with you and meet, yeah.
All right, my friend.
All right,
I'm
well,
going to
thank
post
you.
all of your links and descriptions into the bio
Excellent.
so that everything is there. And then you'll know how to reach Albert.
Perfect. I look forward to
Otherwise,
hearing from you.
yeah.
All
Otherwise,
right.
soulful seekers, stay happy, stay healthy, be well, but most of all, stay inspired. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this transformative episode of Trauma and Transcendence. Your stories matter. I would love to hear them and from you. Connect on our website, healingbeyondtrauma.com, or drop me an email at amanda@healingbeyondtrauma.com. Remember, healing is a journey we take together. Until next time, stay connected, stay inspired. This is Amanda, wishing you bright blessings.